I would imagine that the State Department, the White House, the Chinese, the Taiwanese all have their own perspective on the call, but to him it was a phone call. He received a congratulatory phone call. It was brief, and he also recognizes that we currently have a President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief until January 20th.
We have Aaron Katersky, ABC News correspondent, that's going to fill us in on that just a phone call to Taiwan. Good morning, Aaron.
It'll be a priority one, undoubtedly, for the new Secretary of State, whoever that is, this growing controversy with China over the president-elect's decision to take a phone call from the president of Taiwan, officially part of China, not an independent country. And for 4 decades, U.S. presidents have respected that by avoiding direct contact with the Taiwanese president. And so that was sort of blown up by the president-elect's decision. And at the time, it was impossible to know whether it was a rookie mistake or a deliberate provocation. It appears now, if you listen to Vice President-elect Pence over the weekend, that this was something of a strategy, that they are trying to figure out a way to get into a different kind of a rhythm with China, which, of course, President-elect Trump really took in for criticism for being a currency manipulator, in his words, and something he said on day one he would declare.
Isn't that still somewhat of a rookie mistake? Is it the right way to figure it out before you're even in office making a move like this?
Well, we just don't know. It certainly angered the Chinese, who blamed Taiwan for the small trick, as they called it, and they called for steadying the ship and holding out hope that the Trump administration would respect traditional boundaries of diplomacy. But we're not sure they're willing to be quite as forgiving once he takes office. And if you listen to Vice President-elect Pence, the one China policy that the U.S. has had for the last 4 decades is a bit in doubt, and he said that's a matter for January 20th.
Now, the one China policy, although this was just one phone call, China's made it very clear that if the one China policy is not continued, there may be severe consequences.
Sure, and I think that President-elect Trump has also indicated that he would like there to be consequences. Vice President-elect Pence said over the weekend, we've just been losing to China far too long economically, and the time has come, he said, for the president to deal with China by putting America first. And, again, it's sort of vague, and we're not sure what exactly the president-elect is prepared to do. But it did seem like this was more of a deliberate provocation, rather than, willy-nilly. We know that Ambassador John Bolton, the former UN ambassador, was seen at Trump Tower the day before this phone call. He and other conservatives have been pushing for a new relationship with China for a long time, and so maybe some of the levers at the Heritage Foundation or other conservative think tanks are really starting to be pulled.
Speaking of former UN Secretary John Bolton, the search for Secretary of State seems to have expanded to include new candidates.
Bolton is one of them. John Huntsman, the former ambassador to China under President Obama, former presidential candidate, former Utah governor, is also said to be on that list. So is retired Navy Admiral James Stavridis, who Hillary Clinton once considered to be her running mate. And this expanded list really brings the choice from a binary Giuliani or Romney into a wide-open field, even as the transition team says all the cabinet positions could be filled by the end of the week. Just this morning we learned that Ben Carson would be the president-elect's choice for HUD, Housing and Urban Development.
2 questions. Rudy Giuliani, a huge supporter of the president-elect, seems to be losing ground. He's running out of opportunities. And the second question for you, Aaron, is General Petraeus. Where does he stand, and what would a convicted Secretary of State look like?
Well, and that may be one of the considerations, especially after Donald Trump during the campaign rallied against Hillary Clinton over her handling of classified material. Picking Petraeus would seem to give critics, an opening. And there's a real question as to whether Petraeus campaigned a little bit too hard for the job publicly, and whether Trump kind of liked that. That's not really clear. Still, we're told by the transition team, and specifically some members who seem to be in a position to know that Petraeus is being considered over the totality of his career and not just that one instance. And Vice President-elect Pence, in fact, said over the weekend that he's made mistakes. He paid the consequences for those mistakes. So Pence seems still very much in the running.
And Rudy Giuliani,
Where's
he going to end up?
Is in theory still in the running, although his name hasn't come up quite as often. And there were some questions about some of his overseas business dealings creating a potential conflict, which I think the Trump campaign may want to avoid, given the president-elect's own business dealings that raise potential conflicts. They may not want to exacerbate that criticism. But, we'll see. We know that Giuliani is said to want the job, but now the field is far more open than it was. So it's an indication that the president-elect hasn't been satisfied with either Giuliani or Romney by themselves.
Aaron Katersky, ABC News correspondent. It should be a busy week. We look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks, Jay.
It is 6:28 here at Big